Hey guys, and welcome to another video for Team Lotus Box. Today I'm going to be breaking down a couple games from the recent Magic Online PTQ. These games were pretty interesting and entertaining, and they had some tough decisions, so I want to break down the plays I made and why I made them, and hopefully that's educational for you all. So these are some post-board games against Amulet Titan. We didn't adjust our deck too heavily. We're playing Sultai Shadow, Dylan Donegan's list. You can check it out on Twitter. And we've just boarded in a couple Damping Spheres and a couple Disdainful Strokes, and we've cut our Okos, our Snapcaster, a Fatal Push, and a Cantrip. So that's about it. Pretty straightforward, no heavy adjustments. And we lost game one. Wasn't very exciting. Just played a turn 3 Titan and we couldn't interact. So now for game 2 we're on the play. Alright, so I'm going to jump into the action. So, alright, to start off, this is a quite solid hand, pretty easy keep. We have outs to get toward Delirium pretty quickly. We have interaction for a mana creature. We have a stub, which are pretty solid in this matchup. And we have a shadow, so almost everything we could want. So in spots like this, before you make a decision on what land or spell to play, you always want to start by cycling your Street Wraith. Just get the most information to make your decision, and thankfully we hit a Thoughtseize. So we're just going to fire that off. Vet Shock. Here we get Water Grave because we're probably not going to need double blue. We actually get Overgrown Tomb. This was probably a slight misstep. I think looking back at it, we're unlikely to need double green, but we could need double blue in some spots if we draw another Thought Scour or Stubborn Denial. So I probably would have just gone with Water Grave if I could run that back. But nonetheless, it's pretty comparable. And we're just going to fire off Thoughtseize, see Tribe Scout, Pact, Titan. Now, with this hand, there's a couple avenues we could go. We could take the Tribe Scout and try and race Titan coming down, but he has a lot of draws that let him get past that, and since we have an answer for his other Titan in the form of Stubborn Denial, I'm just going to take the Primeval Titan and, try and exhaust him on that axis. We also have a push to cover the Tribe Scout, so it's not really too much of a concern. So pretty straightforward decision. We're just going to take Titan here. And onto his turn, he's going to play Tribe Scout. Alright, so here if we push, that gives us Delirium. So we can fire off this Traverse with Delirium. Now, we're pretty much locked into pushing. The question is what we traverse for. So since we only have 1 black mana, getting another shadow isn't incredibly useful. So there's a couple options. The main ones are Fetch Land or Street Wraith. And considering that we're pretty likely to draw another land in the meantime, and if we do, Street Wraith does the most to accelerate our clock, I'm just going to fire off the push and traverse for a Street Wraith. And we cycle it on our turn because he knows we have it, so there's no information to be given away. And if we had hit a Mishra's Bauble, it would be much better to use the Bauble immediately and get access to the card right away. So you just want to fire off those Street Wraiths as soon as you can, unless you're saving them to trick. And he draws another Tribe Scout, plays that. We're fortunate to draw another Shadow. So we're just going to deploy both of those. And we got 2 5/5s. So this is a pretty decent spot. Now his draw for turn is an Azusa, which is a problem because it lets him deploy enough mana to just cast the Pact in his hand in response to our Inquisition. So in this spot, we start by cracking the Peatland. This is important because since we have the island, we know we have enough, we have the ability to play Inquisition and leave up Stubborn Denial. So since we can already cast every spell in our hand, we want to get more information as to what our next draws are so we can make better decisions about what to do in our turn. And there's also the upside that if we draw a Mishra's Bauble, which is exactly what happened, then we get to play it and have access to the card right away, as well as more information about what the top card of their library is. So here we bauble them, and we see that they have a Once Upon a Time on top. It's pretty unfortunate for us because it's a lot of looks at a Titan, but they already have one in their graveyard, so the Once Upon a Time is probably about a third to hit. They're going to pact in response to this Inquisition, and we have to counter it. You could hold it because they have to tap their lands, but our clock isn't quite fast enough, so kind of just priced into hoping their Once Upon a Time bricks. Counting Teleria West as an out, their Once Upon a Time actually has a lot more hits. It's probably like 60%. So, you know, it's not a great spot, but we have a clock down and can get a little lucky and get there. Alright, so they're going to fire off a Once Upon a Time, and they brick, which is awesome. Exactly what we needed. And our last couple draws aren't too relevant. We're just going to play a Thoughtseize to increase our clock. They're forced to chump. And then post-combat we'll play Sphere. Just in this spot you got to make sure you play your Sphere second. If you play your Sphere and then try and Thoughtseize, the Sphere will count itself and then you can't cast it. Alright, and they bricked off, so got that one. Alright. On to game 3. For this one, we're going to be on the draw and take a look at our opener. So this is a pretty solid one. We have a nice suite of interaction, and since we're on the draw, we get 3 looks at a second land along with the Street Race. This list is also playing one Once Upon a Time, so that counts as another look at a land functionally. And Disdainful Stroke is one of the best sideboard cards in the matchup, and we have our best clock in terms of shadow, so it's a little too good to send back. Alright, so I'm going to keep. Opponent mulls to 6, and sorry, no, they keep 7, and they're just going to Stirrings for a Gruul Turf. So good to know about. And we draw Once Upon a Time for turn. So in a spot like this, before you cast the Once Upon a Time, you're still going to want to cycle Street Wraith to give yourself as much information as possible. And we hit another Street Wraith, which was pretty ideal. And then we cycled it into a Stubborn Denial. So with this Once Upon a Time, now that we haven't drawn a land off the Street Wraith, we know we're probably looking for a land. And we're going to cast it, see a bunch of lands, and just take a fetch. Alright. And now for turn, there's some consideration to holding up Stubborn or Push, but we also only have one turn to take an Amulet if they play like a untapped land Amulet. It's kind of bad for us because we won't get to Stubborn it. So, and we can always push any creature they would play the next turn without really losing much. So I think we're going to just make sure we guarantee getting to use our mana this turn and fire off the Inquisition. And we're going to fetch Shock Watery Grave and fire off the Inquisition. So this shows us a pretty medium hand. There's an Azusa, 2 Dismemberers, and a bunch of bounce lands and a Slayer Stronghold. So in this spot, given that we have an answer to a Titan already in the Disdainful Stroke, and we have an answer to the Azusa, it's still going to let him play some lands the turn he plays it, but that's not too bad for us. We're just going to take a Dismember and try and line up our Stubborn Denial with the second Dismember. Alright, so on to their turn. Just going to play Bounce Land and pass. Now in this spot, we could play a Shadow. We could fetch Shock and play a Shadow, but we want to make sure that we line up our push with their Azusa on this turn. And we don't have another way to get Revolt, so I'm just going to decide to pass. Hold up this Assassin's Trophy / push / stub. See what happens. Alright, and they're almost certain to slam Azusa, and that's what they do. And important to respond to the first trigger if they play a bounce land. But they did draw a forest, so now we know that that was one of their unknown cards, leaving them. So they play Gruul Turf, and that leaves them with a Dismember and 2 unknowns. They're going to float a mana, and we're going to fetch and fire off this push in response. Definitely shocking. Got to accelerate the clock here. And they drew a Tribe Scout. Alright, so on our turn, this is a pretty clear turn to deploy the Shadow, or at least consider it. But since it's a 3/3 and it's not that, and it really puts our shields down, I think it's probably just worth it to hold up the Stroke. And we do get to Thought Scour end of turn if they don't cast anything. So that is what we're going to do. Just taking a little bit of time off to make sure that we keep our shields down. Once we draw a land, we're really off to the races. Alright, so now they just have 2 unknown cards, and looks like one of them is a Primeval Titan, so we're going to go ahead and stroke that. No questions asked there. And this turn, you get put in a somewhat similar spot, except we draw the land, so now we get to hold up Trophy or hold up Double Stub. And we know one of their cards is Dismember, the other one's an unknown. So in this spot, since I'm unlikely to need to trophy anything on their turn, and I think taking them off 6 mana is really not something that's likely to be worth anything with this trophy, I'm just going to play the Shadow off of an Overgrown Tomb and hold up Double Stub or Stub Thought Scour. Can keep that card velocity going, because post board they have a bunch of engineered explosives in addition to Dismember we know about, so it's quite likely that I'll want to stub this turn, and I'd really like to be able to cast the Thought Scour too. Alright, so here we're mostly hoping to fade a Titan. We have everything else covered. And alright, looks like they had the Titan, so we're going to Thought Scour in response. And Titan's going to resolve. Pretty unfortunate turn of events, but the game's not over yet. And they're going to bog us, so probably should have waited till they resolved their triggers to Thought Scour, but that's pretty minor. But that is going to possibly come back to hurt me. And alright, so here we drew a Bauble. So we're probably going to want to start off by bobbling ourselves. Our opponent has a Titan in play, so their next couple of draws don't matter so much. And we're likely going to want to trophy the Titan in their upkeep, pretty much no matter what happens. So Field of the Dead is going to be a big problem going long. So now I'm thinking the way we can win this game is by getting a big enough chunk to put them in range of a Windcaller Aven. We have 1 Windcaller Aven in our deck, which is a creature that you can cycle to give something flying. And if we can get them below 13, then we can jump over the zombies and kill them. So that's the game plan, and we have to play toward that. So that makes this attack with the Shadow pretty much something that has to happen. I can't afford to trophy their Titan first, because then they'll just get a zombie and chump, and that really puts me in a tough spot from winning the game. So I'm just going to start with the bauble myself to see what it is, and we reveal a Traverse. Traverse can get Windcaller Haven, so this leaves us with a pretty tough choice, because we do need that Traverse, but we also need to weigh whether we'll have another opportunity to get in damage against the field. And ultimately, it seems like we're probably not going to have another opportunity to get in enough damage, so I am just going to shuffle this away, even though we need the card, and hope to draw it later. So they don't block, which, you know, I can understand, because Tribe Scout lets them turn any bounce land they draw into 2 zombies per turn. They can just play it, and then pick it up, and then Tribe Scout it in. So that's a pretty valuable thing to have access to, and they probably don't expect the Windcaller Haven. So, yep, before damage, we're going to fetch Shock, and they'll take 9. So we need to get down to 2 and find a Windcaller Haven. Alright, so upkeep, we're going to fire off this Assassin's Trophy, and we do draw a Traverse, which is great news, although we're still 1 type short of Delirium. So we're going to fire that. Now this is going to give them a zombie, and they're going to attack, put us to 3. Which makes sense, because if they have a land, then if we don't have a creature or removal spell, so we're, yeah, that's an easy Stubborn Denial. But putting us to 3 makes sense, because if they play a land and we don't have anything, we're just dead. Alright, so they attack, and we know their last card is still that Dismember that they've been holding on to all game. Alright, and drawing another Death Shadow keeps us alive at least, which is pretty important, I would say. So now we have 2 blockers, and we could consider attacking to try and bluff and force a chump. This is important because if he does chump, when he draws another land, he still can't kill us, so it could buy us 2 more turns. But considering he has a Dismember in hand, even if we're repping a potential Street Wraith, he can Dismember it. He doesn't know we have a stub, so he'd probably feel safe enough taking it that I think it's not worth the chance of just dying on the crackback. But that is something I thought about for a while. So we're just going to pass. And alright, so the opponent passes here with not too much going on. It's possible they just drew not a bounce land. If they drew a bounce land, they would have played it. If they drew a Titan, they would have played it. So the number of things, the thing this is most likely to be is a land that isn't a bounce land. And we're looking for a sorcery, and we get one. Perfect card, Thoughtseize. Now this takes us all the way down to 1 life, which puts them in range of a shadow, and lets us make sure the coast is clear. And they drew another Dismember, so that Thoughtseize was key, because now we can stub the final Dismember. So we're just going to Traverse for Windcaller Haven, and we'll use it. They're going to try and Dismember, and then we'll stub the Dismember and have lethal. So this was a really tense game where we needed to draw fortunately in a lot of spots and managed to get there, beating a Primeval Titan. So, not something you get to do every day, beat a Resolve Primeval Titan getting Field of the Dead. But Windcaller Haven really lets you attack these decks from an angle they don't expect. So if you're looking for a Shadow deck to try, I would really recommend giving this a look. Alright, thanks for watching.